Magnesium glycinate feels safe after 50. People take it to help with sleep, muscle tension, and blood pressure, and it works well for many. But that familiarity conceals something that most people overlook. It is soft, absorbs well, aids in sleep, muscle tension, and, in some situations, blood pressure, and it works in many cases. But here's something most folks don't realize. When taken incorrectly, a supplement that appears to be beneficial can quietly become extra labor for your kidneys, and that difference is far more important beyond 50 than it was earlier in life. I've observed this trend several times in the clinic. People come in feeling fine, with no pain, no obvious warning signs, and no alarming lab numbers. But when you step back and look over time, kidney function has been slipping, slowly, silently. Not because of one big mistake, but because of small things adding up when no one stops to look closely. Here's the straightforward fact I tell patients. The kidneys are your body's filters. They purify your blood on a daily basis. They remove waste, balance minerals, and maintain proper interior chemistry. They continue to work hard after the age of 50, but they lack the same cushion as before. They clear things more slowly and can handle less extra stress than before. So when magnesium enters your body on a daily basis, even in a benign form such as glycinate, your kidneys must manage it. They choose what to utilize, hold, and put out. If the balance is even slightly off, you won't notice it. There is no warning. It simply keeps building up in the backdrop. I am not claiming magnesium is hazardous. No, and I'm not advising you to stop taking it. What I'm arguing is that beyond 50, context is more important than aim. Timing is important, as is hydration, and kidney strain does not appear unexpectedly. Whether you can feel it or not, your kidneys continue to operate quietly. If you want to stay on your feet, maintain your strength, and defend your independence in the long run, renal function is an important element of the foundation, even if it's easy to miss. So, if magnesium is already part of your daily regimen or you're considering starting, subscribe now. This is about learning how to support your kidneys over time, before little daily loads become limits you don't realize until much later. When I walk patients through this in the clinic and slow it down, a lot of things start to make sense. Your kidneys are always working, and they clean your blood, remove waste, alter fluids, and maintain mineral balance minute by minute. Magnesium fits perfectly into that scheme. Your body requires it. It promotes muscular mobility, nerve signaling, heart rhythm, and blood pressure, and with good cause. We commonly discuss this mineral. But here's something most folks don't realize. Magnesium has two roles in the body. The same mineral that your body consumes must also be removed by your kidneys. When there's more than you need and intake equals demand, everything goes well. However, when more magnesium enters the body on a daily basis, your kidneys must constantly adjust to maintain stable blood levels. That extra labor does not hurt. It does not register as a problem. It merely instructs the filtration system to accomplish more over time, silently, and without drawing attention. This is a common occurrence in my clinic. Younger patients usually handle it without much difficulty. Their kidneys filter faster. They adapt rapidly. They have greater buffer. After 50, the buffer begins to narrow. Filtration slows. Clearance becomes inefficient. Even when lab findings appear normal, the margin is narrower than it used to be. This is the part that most folks overlook. Magnesium does not stress the kidneys because it is toxic. It causes strain when the amount coming in exceeds what your body can comfortably use and clear at this stage in life. The interval between utilizing and cleansing is when long-term tension silently accumulates. When I get down with patients over the age of 50 and we discuss kidney function, things usually become confused, and their laboratory results appear to be satisfactory. Creatinine levels are within range. Nothing appears out of place at first look. However, when we slow it down and examine what happens over time, the picture isn't as reassuring as it appears. Here's something most folks don't realize. After the age of 50, kidney filtration continues to function, but it gradually slows without drawing attention to itself. GFR is the marker that doctors use to assess this. Even when creatinine remains normal, GFR continues to decrease year after year. You don't notice the change. There is no point when your body flags it. But biologically, the margin is shrinking. At the same time, many people in this stage of life are already exerting constant strain on their kidneys. Blood pressure often rises. Blood sugar levels may be increasing. Even without a diabetes diagnosis, drugs such as diuretics and ACE inhibitors become a part of everyday life. None of this indicates that something has gone wrong. It simply indicates that the kidneys are operating under more consistent pressure than before. Now, add magnesium on a daily basis to that setting. Magnesium is readily absorbed, particularly in forms such as glycinate. It enters the bloodstream easily. From there, the kidneys are in charge of eliminating anything the body does not need. When filtration is slow and baseline demands are high, clearance may lag. It does not happen suddenly or abruptly, but over time, the balance might shift enough to make a difference. This is where people frequently misinterpret what is happening. Because nothing feels urgent, minor adjustments are rationalized away. Fatigue that feels heavier than usual. Weakness that does not add up. These do not clearly point to the kidneys, which is the problem. At this point, kidney strain is not obvious. It can take months or even years before any lab number becomes plainly abnormal. That does not make magnesium the villain here. It indicates that the context has changed. After age 50, the same intake can behave differently in the body simply because the kidneys filter under different conditions than they did earlier in life. When we get to this point in the discourse at the clinic, people are frequently astonished. They'll tell me they're sleeping better, their muscles feel calmer, and their night cramps are gone, which could all be true. Magnesium is capable of producing these effects. But here's something most folks don't realize. Feeling better does not always imply that the biology underlying is moving in the same direction, particularly when it comes to renal filtration beyond 50. I've seen this pattern repeat itself. Patients experience the benefit on the surface, while their kidneys work harder in the background. When we track laboratories over time, even just a few months, this is something that consistently appears. GFR decreases by 15 to 20%. Not overnight, and not as a result of anything catastrophic. Rather, a gradual decrease that does not correspond to how the person feels on a daily basis. That's the tricky part. Subjective improvement can conceal objective strain. What's happening is subtle. Magnesium is well absorbed, relaxes the neurological system, and promotes sleep. At the same time, if intake continues to exceed what the body can use, the kidneys must remove the extra in settings that are already less forgiving than they formerly were. Even if the person appears to be feeling better, the extra labor accumulates over time. This is where confusion arises. People assume that better sleep means greater overall health. However, renal filtration does not detect stress early. It does not cause pain. It doesn't interfere with sleep immediately. It simply adjusts and compensates until the margin is smaller than anyone anticipated. When people do notice differences, it's sometimes simple to explain away weariness that seems heavier than expected or weakness that doesn't match up. Those impulses do not point directly to the kidneys. That's why they're so frequently overlooked. I want to be really clear here. Magnesium is not the problem. It is not a bad supplement. In many circumstances, it is beneficial. The issue is context, how frequently it is taken, how much is ingested from all sources, and how a 50, 60, or 70-year-old kidney takes that load against a younger one. If you take supplements on a regular basis and have never been shown how your kidneys digest them, this is important. Subscribe now. Understanding that relationship is one of the most critical elements toward maintaining your strength, balance, and independence in the long run. This is frequently the point at which patients hesitate and say, "But I don't take much magnesium." Most of the time, they are correct. The dose itself is not excessive. What's missing is how magnesium flows through the body and what it implications for the kidneys when water levels are low. When magnesium enters your system, it circulates in the bloodstream and performs its intended function in muscles, neurons, and the heart. Following that, anything that is no longer in use must be removed. There is no substitute path. Everything eventually returns to the kidneys via the bloodstream. Your kidneys are continually filtering. Throughout the day, blood flows through them repeatedly, providing them with multiple opportunities to balance fluids and minerals, such as magnesium. Under the correct conditions, that procedure remains silent and efficient. Hydration is what keeps the conditions stable. Magnesium does not flow freely in a dry system. When you drink less water, your blood becomes more concentrated, and so do your minerals. Now, the kidneys are passing thicker blood via the same filters. They can still accomplish their jobs, but the workload increases. I frequently use a simple illustration to demonstrate this. Think of your kidneys as a coffee filter. With enough water running through, the filter remains clear and everything flows through smoothly. When water is limited, the flow decreases and residue begins to accumulate. Nothing is broken. The filter is simply working under more strain. This is why, clinically speaking, overdose is not the most common cause of magnesium-related renal stress. It's dehydration. People tend to focus on the supplement rather than the water. Magnesium, which is generally eliminated without trouble, becomes more difficult to handle as hydration drops, especially around the age of 50, when the kidneys have less buffer than they formerly did. And this does not announce itself. There's no clear warning, no moment when you sense a difference. The kidneys just filter more concentrated blood day after day. That increased resistance adds up over time, resulting in cumulative workload. This is where the real pressure builds. This is where a fairly prevalent misconception emerges in the clinic. Patients will say, "But I'm using magnesium glycinate, which is chelated and supposed to be kidney safe." And that belief makes sense since it appears everywhere. This is where folks get tangled up. Chelation assists with absorption. It makes no difference to what happens next. When magnesium is linked to glycine, it enters the bloodstream more easily and is easier on the stomach. That bit is real. However, once it enters the bloodstream, the kidneys continue to function normally. They must decide what remains and what is cleared. Chelation does not lower the burden, so when you hear the phrase kidney safe, it's worth pausing to define what it means. It doesn't imply no influence. It indicates easier absorption. Clearance is a separate step that remains fully dependent on renal capacity. Now, add another layer. Most people do not take magnesium in isolation. They are also taking vitamin D, calcium, and perhaps zinc. When it comes time to clear these minerals, they all follow overlapping paths. The kidneys do not digest them one at a time. They are managing them collectively. And when others are present at higher levels, the balancing act becomes increasingly difficult. When we examine attentively, we can see that this occurs on a constant basis. People frequently underestimate how much magnesium they actually consume. A supplement label might state 200 or 300 milligrams, and that seems acceptable. However, magnesium can also be found in multivitamins, fortified foods, and in the diet. When you add it all up, many people consume closer to 500 or 600 milligrams each day, sometimes more, without recognizing it. Biologically, most individuals require approximately 300 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium per day. This includes what comes from eating. Beyond that, the body does not hold substantial amounts. The excess must be eliminated. Every day, the kidneys bear the brunt of the clearing burden. Here's where context comes into play again. Magnesium is not bad. Chelated magnesium is not the issue. The problem is cumulative load, different sources, overlapping minerals, and a kidney system that no longer has the same buffer capacity as before. None of this produces an immediate reaction. It simply increases the amount of effort that the kidneys must do to maintain stable blood chemistry. That's why focusing solely on magnesium's shape misses the point. Absorption is only the beginning. What counts just as much is how much total mineral passes through the filtration system over time. In the clinic, this is usually the point at which the talk becomes practical. People wonder, so what exactly am I doing wrong? And it's usually not the number on the label. It's how magnesium fits into the rest of the day, as well as what else is going through the system at the moment. Early on, I noticed a pattern of taking magnesium on an empty stomach, usually first thing in the morning. People do this because they want more energy or attention, or because they believe it improves absorption. What people don't realize is what happens behind the scenes. When magnesium enters the body without meals, absorption might accelerate, blood levels rise faster than usual, and the kidneys must operate swiftly to restore equilibrium. In a younger body, this transition occurs seamlessly. After 50, it becomes slower. This quick spike results in a short-term surge. Even if you don't realize it right away, your kidneys must buffer. Repeat it frequently enough that the fast in / fast out pattern causes undue strain on the filtering system. Another pattern appears even more frequently. Magnesium is not being consumed on its own. It is stacked on top of other minerals and drugs, often without anyone understanding how much overlap exists. Calcium, vitamin D, zinc, and a multivitamin all appear to make sense on their own. Then they arrive at the kidneys almost simultaneously. These minerals aren't cleaned one by one. To maintain blood chemistry steady, the kidneys handle them all at the same time utilizing common routes. When several demands pile up, the system must handle more at once. When you add blood pressure drugs, diuretics, or antacids to the mix, the workload increases even more. Nothing dramatic occurs. There is no visible signal. The kidneys simply need to work harder to keep everything together. This is where timing and overlap become more important than people realize. It's not that one supplement is harmful. It's about cumulative pressure when several objects request permission at the same time. And after 50, with less buffer and slower adjustment, that overlap becomes a significant source of stress for the kidneys. There's another aspect here that almost never gets blamed, despite the fact that it can significantly alter the burden. Another pattern I find appears late in the day and is almost always overlooked since it appears innocuous. People take magnesium at bedtime in the hopes of relaxing or sleeping better, but they do so when they are already dehydrated. At night, renal filtration naturally slows. That is part of the regular circadian rhythm. The body goes into repair and conservation mode, and the kidneys don't clear blood as quickly as they do during the day. When magnesium enters the system during that time period, it must still be digested, but it does so quietly and slowly. Now add hydration on top of it. Many people quit drinking water in the evenings to prevent waking up during the night. Others consumed coffee earlier in the afternoon or ate a salty dinner, both of which cause fluid to leave the body. By the time magnesium is taken, the system has already run empty. In that scenario, the kidneys are required to filter more concentrated blood at a moment when their rhythm is purposefully slower. Nothing remarkable occurs, and there is no immediate reaction, but the burden increases, precisely when the margin is thinnest. Night after night, that disparity puts pressure where the system is least flexible. This is why merely taking magnesium before bed isn't the solution. It's magnesium before bed if you haven't hydrated properly earlier in the evening. The kidneys can manage magnesium much more comfortably when there is enough fluid circulating through the system before sleep, rather than attempting to catch up during the night. Again, this does not announce itself. Sleep might still feel better. The muscles may still relax, but underneath, the kidneys are quietly adjusting by filtering thicker blood during a slower phase of their daily cycle. That is another way cumulative tension accumulates without anyone's knowledge. When we start talking about kidney protection, I usually shift the attention back to something more straightforward. The idea is not to eliminate magnesium, but to alter the amount of pressure the kidneys experience while clearing it. This comes down to flow, timing, and spacing. The first lever is hydration, which involves drinking water throughout the day, rather than all at once. When fluids flow steadily into the bloodstream, magnesium becomes more diluted, and that means the kidneys don't have to filter concentrated minerals in brief spurts. The work is spread out, and the system operates more smoothly. The second shift concerns magnesium's origin. Magnesium in meals behaves differently from magnesium in capsules. When it comes from food, the absorption is slower and more gradual. There is no sudden increase in blood levels. The kidneys observe a softer slope, rather than a spike, which is important around 50 when margins are tighter. Timing also crucial. Taking everything at once produces a single load for the kidneys to bear. Spreading intake reduces the peak. It does not change the total amount of fluid passing through the system, but it does change how heavy each filtering pass feels over time. and that difference adds up. And I also focus on foods that silently support renal workload without attempting to treat anything. Blueberries and cranberries improve urine flow. Avocado and olive oil promote good circulation. Walnuts contain lipids, which minimize oxidative stress. Green tea provides moderate polyphenols without increasing mineral levels. This is not about compiling a huge list. It's about keeping the environment calm while filtering occurs. Then, there's something no one expects me to say. Kidneys benefit from breaks. Taking vitamins every day does not necessarily allow the system time to reset. Periodic days without mineral supplementation allow the clearance to catch up. Blood levels drop. For a while, the filters function in lighter conditions. That delay can mean more than people think. None of this elicits an immediate feeling. You will not feel your kidneys relaxing. What varies is the background workload. Less attention, fewer spikes, and longer recuperation periods between demands. Over months and years, this is how filtration capacity is maintained, while also protecting strength, balance, and daily function. I warn patients that kidney strain rarely appears all at once. It does not crash. It makes no attempt to proclaim itself. It usually saves you time if you know where to look. Early warning signs are frequently overlooked. Fatigue that lasts longer than it should, muscle weakness or cramping that is not improving as quickly as it formerly did, a gentle, restless stomach that comes and goes, or overnight urine changes that are bothersome rather than frightening. None of these point directly to the kidneys, which is why they're frequently overlooked. What important is the pattern? When such signs appear together or persist, despite things that should help, it's generally a sign that mineral balance isn't working in tandem with filtration. That doesn't imply harm. It indicates that the system is under load, and at this point, correction is still effective. This is where halting can be more beneficial than pushing through. Temporarily discontinuing supplements allows the kidneys to catch up. Increasing hydration distributes the workload and reduces concentration. Shifting magnesium intake toward meals slows absorption and smooths the curve that the kidneys must deal with. These are not treatments. They're strategies to relieve strain as the system rebalances. I also encourage folks to avoid guessing. Simple laboratory markers, such as creatinine and GFR, provide context over time. Not to chase numbers, but to identify trends. Stable lab results, combined with easing symptoms, indicate that the workload is returning to balance. The important element here is timing. When you recognize early warning signs and respond, you're working with kidney biology rather than against it. That is how small imbalances are corrected before they become long-term strains, and how independence, energy, and daily function are maintained over time. When I step back and look at the big picture with patients, this is what I want them to remember. The kidneys do not work in isolation. They're inextricably linked to the blood vessels, circulation, and how well each organ receives what it requires. When the kidney workload is properly managed, the entire system functions more smoothly. That's why this discussion isn't just about magnesium. It is about respecting how the body processes minerals over time. Magnesium glycinate can be beneficial. It is well tolerated. However, it is not one size fits all, especially after 50, when filtration margins narrow and small stresses accumulate more quickly than before. Long-term success does not require perfection. It's awareness, paying attention to timing, hydration, overlap, and the signals your body sends when your balance begins to shift. These signals are not failures, they are information. And by responding early, you allow the kidneys to adapt rather than forcing them to compensate indefinitely. I've noticed that people who take this approach have more consistent circulation, more predictable energy, and better day-to-day function over time. Not because they avoid supplements completely, but because they stop treating biology as a quick fix. If this video impacted your heart in any way, please let me know by liking it, sharing it with someone you care about, or leaving a comment. If this level of understanding is important to you, and you want to maintain your strength, balance, and independence by working with your biology rather than guessing, subscribe now. This channel is about making quiet, long-term decisions. before minor stresses turn into permanent limitations.